All righty. Again, good morning. It's lovely to see you all. I'm grateful that we get to be here together, grateful to be able to serve in this way, and really glad to be back here at Heartland UU. I was so impressed with this congregation the first time I preached here, and it was just warm and friendly and fun, and I really appreciate this room. Thank you. Thanks for allowing me to log some more flight hours in the pulpit. This is an important part of my ministerial formation. I'm Judson Webb. I'm this intern minister, as Susan said, down in Columbus. I'm in seminary, third year, concluding year. I've got senioritis pretty bad. I'm ready to be done with this with school. I'm originally from West Texas. Don't hold it against me. I was raised by liberals. I promise I'm a tried and true lefty. I have been living actually for the last 14 years in Sweden. So you can. I have my socialist street cred well in hand. I moved there in 2011 because I married a Swede. Together we have two half Swedish, half American daughters, and I also have one other child who is a 100% American son from an earlier relationship. He lives in Denver. So that's just a little bit more about me. I'm just really grateful to be here, and again, thank you for having me. Especially on Easter, even though we're not traditionally Christian organization, it is Easter out there among the English. So thank you. It's an honor to preach. This is the first high holy day of, even though it's not one here necessarily that I've preached on. So this is exciting. One other quick note before I get going is when I conclude speaking, you might hear me use the words aho metakuye yasin. This is a Lakota phrase, and it means all my relations, or we are all related. It's often used as the amen in Lakota prayer. I'm not Lakota, but I've been a guest in many traditional Lakota prayer ceremonies, and so I'll often end prayers or sermons with those words, and I do this not as a matter of appropriation, but I do this as an acknowledgement of the indigenous lands upon which we all stand. So, before we step off into this exploration of original sin and basic goodness, I'd like to just invite us to take 3 deep breaths. This will help us regulate our nervous systems, as the world today can be quite rattling, quite unnerving. On the 3rd breath, we'll hold it just for a second, and then we can let that last breath out with a sigh. So with me. Hold it. Let's do it one more time. There we go. That holding it piece is nice. So let's dive into it. One of the most interesting things about seminary is the idea of formation. In seminary speak, formation means the formation of one's ministry. One's ministry is comprised of one's theology, one's mission in the world, the place where one might work, and how one approaches that work. It's the formation of the ministerial identity. So this question is, as a minister, who am I? What do I believe? How will I put those beliefs into practice, and for whom? Oh, buddy. Oh, that's okay. No, it's okay. Don't apologize. That happens. I've raised 3 of them. I know well. It's all good. Recently, in contemplating this question of formation, I wrote the following passage in my journal. It was one of those that just came. I'm willing to wrestle with things publicly, theological things, philosophical things, moral things. I'm willing to do this wrestling from the pulpit, and that's one of the skills I bring as a preacher. I don't know everything, and I don't pretend to know everything. I try to sort it out as I go because that's what we're all doing. Hopefully what I can provide is some accompaniment as we do that together. So, as we pluralists, humanists, atheists, people of faith, agnostics, as we gather here in a church-like space on a day when many others who gather in similar spaces are celebrating the story of their God rising from the dead, I'd like to invite us to do a little theological wrestling. I grew up Episcopalian, but not a very devout one. My family didn't practice extensively. My dad was an atheist, and my mother was a self-professed Episcopagan. I went to church to see friends, but by high school I was mostly done with the church. However, my home culture of West Texas was very conservative, and so there was a lot of Pentecostalism around. During my early teen years, as I was drifting out of the Episcopal tradition, I did do some seeking in these Pentecostal spaces. It was there that I met the intensity of those who believe in original sin, hell, salvation through Christ, the Holy Spirit, all the rest of it. And through these beliefs, though they never made much rational sense to me, even as a teenager, I did try them on for a while. Because it seemed like everyone else around me was believing them, and some believed to the degree that their lives seemed to have answers that mine lacked. Some of these folks had a confidence that I envied. You might call it a framework of confident meaning making. As a struggling young person, that confidence was attractive, so I tried it on, and for about a year, I became a born-again Christian. Walked down the aisle during altar call, received the word. There was even a half-hearted attempt to talk in tongues, and do hallelujah and umbable and all the rest of it, the whole deal. True story. And here I want to make something real clear. As long as it's not Christian nationalism or justifying abusive behavior in some way, I've got no problem with Christianity. As you use, we are invited to do meaning making in the ways that make the most sense to us. In fact, I consider myself a believer in the core message of Jesus. I'd even go so far as to say I'm a type of Christian. I'm just not a Trinitarian Christian, as I don't believe in original sin, hell, the Trinity, or the idea of Jesus as God incarnate. I'm a committed pluralist. I draw meaning from lots of traditions. Some Christians might call me a heretic for saying that, but there it is. Arriving at these beliefs was a winding path, and I had to ask a lot of questions. And one of the big ones was, what is original sin? So to answer this, we've got to have just a little bit of history. In the first 300 years of the Christian movement, there was huge debate, mostly between the Gnostics, who did not agree with the idea of Jesus as God and original sin, and the followers of Irenaeus and some other significant teachers who believed that Jesus was God and was sent to save us from an original badness that from birth all humans carried within, original sin. The Gnostics rejected this idea. They said Jesus wasn't God, but rather the prime example of a person who discovered the innate divinity that Gnostics believed resided within every person. They believed that people could be tempted away from this inner divinity by sin, but not that people were pre-made of sin. The Gnostics argued that we all possessed this spark of the divine, and we could realize this divine spark like Jesus did. Back then, first 300 years of Christianity, there was usually one main Christian teacher in each big city, throughout Judea, throughout the Mediterranean. And city debates, they were a matter of city pride. A teacher would have formal students and citizen followers, and the whole town would often stand for a particular side of a religious or philosophical argument of the day. This came out of the schools of philosophy of Socrates and Plato. So debate was a sort of a civic recreation thing. It was kind of the football of the day. So these Gnostic debates went on for 3 centuries. And they went on until the Council of Nicaea in the mid-300s, where some big things happened. First, The Roman Emperor Constantine, who had recently become Christian, declared that Christianity would henceforth be the state religion of the Roman Empire. Second, with Rome's backing, the early iterations of the Trinity were introduced. It was decided that Jesus was God incarnate and that he was also the prophesied Jewish Messiah sent to redeem us from this original sin. The Gnostics lost the argument. They were branded heretics. Over the next 150 years, the idea of original sin would come to dominate the Christian lexicon. In those next 150 years, the books of the Bible would be compiled. And in the mid-400s, they would be established as canon. And they were chosen in part to support the winning narrative. And for the next 1,600 years, original sin and Jesus as God/Messiah has been the central organizing doctrine of the church. Now, I raise this history to illustrate one simple point. Original sin is not real. It's just the winning side of an ancient Christian debate that the Roman Empire decided to throw its weight behind. Now remember, the Gnostics believed that all people had a spark of the divine within, and they believed that spiritual self-knowledge, combined with loving others and good works like Jesus did, that this was the best way to contact that innate divine spark. And yet, here we are, 1,600 years later, many of us still suffering this weird belief in original badness. Now, you probably don't consciously think this belief is true anymore, but it's built into systems all around us. Though sometimes in the church, nowadays it's softened. It's still built into the mainstream Christian church, and it totally dominates the more conservative branches. It's built into how we perceive individual failings in society. Think about for a minute how we look at criminality. How we prioritize punishment and revenge for badness over rehabilitation towards an idea of basic or inherent goodness. I'd go so far as to posit that original sin is still metastasized onto our overall worldview. How often do we see something going on, say, think about war, or violent crime, or hatred, or racism, or corruption? How often do we see these things going on and think, that's just human nature? If we look at the moral arc of history, as Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King called it, that the long it bends towards justice, do we really believe that? How many of us look at human history and think, human beings will probably always be fundamentally prone to badness? How often does the world feel this way? Irredeemable, a plotted course forever uncorrectable. That's original sin, folks. Original badness. Just human nature. I refuse to believe it. Not one word. As we say in Texas, not one iota. Other than the bodies of the two mothers in which they grew, I was the first human being to make physical contact with every one of my 3 children. I caught them all as they exited the womb. And I don't care how many centuries we've been buying this original sin business, you'll never, ever, ever be able to convince me that those perfect, tiny, little baby bodies housed concentrated human evil. Never, ever. It's a fallacy. Good news is, there's a way out, or perhaps through this fallacy. As we heard in the opening reading, the notion of basic goodness fundamentally asserts that at the core of our being, we're inherently good. At the heart of this teaching is the idea that basic goodness is not something to be acquired or cultivated, but it's already there. It just needs to be uncovered, embraced. Our inherent goodness is already present. We need only strip away the layers of ego and conditioning that obscure it. Sounds pretty Gnostic to me, actually, those heretics. So what happens, though, when we embrace the idea of basic goodness? What happens to our concepts of self and others? What impact does this thinking have on us? In UU spaces, for example, we subscribe to a similar belief. Our first principle states that we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. That's pretty close to the idea of basic goodness. So, since it's Easter, are y'all open to a little experiment, a little thought experiment? A little challenge round, maybe we could call it. The kids call it these days, a challenge round. Could you run that mic for us, Susan? I'm going to ask 3 questions to the congregation, and Susan will bring the mic, and you can just answer. I'll move it along pretty quickly. Might not get to everybody, but they're pretty simple questions, and we'll do this fast. We'll keep it moving. Question 1. Do Donald Trump, MAGA followers, and ICE agents possess basic goodness? Or are they inherently bad people? Do they have, as we UUs say, inherent worth and dignity? Or do they not? No right or wrong answers. Raise your hand if you'd like to chime in. Go ahead.
I would say, yes, they do have inherent worth and dignity, but their life experiences have basically made them ignore it.
Okay. Other voices? Anyone else want to jump in and just give what you think? No right or wrong answer here, please.
I'd say yes, they do have inherent worth and goodness to them. They're doing the best they can in hard circumstances.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, up here in front row.
I would take an in-between view. I would take the John Locke blank slate point of view on this. I think we're not born either with goodness or evil, but we are born
a blank slate.
A blank slate.
Tabula rasa.
Yeah,
understood. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else on question 1? Yep, one more back here. This will be the last one for question 1.
So I'm a biologist, and that has trained my worldview. When I see evil or behavior in groups or in individuals that seems to have no conscience, no goodness, and is plainly terrifying, I think those individuals and those groups are reverting back to the use of the more primitive brain, because we see awful behaviors or behaviors without conscience in lower animals that are no different from what evil people do. So it's a way of looking at evolution, and eventually we as humans will probably evolve beyond where our reptilian brain matters in our moral decision making.
Thank you. Good. Okay. Question number 2. If Donald Trump and his followers inherently possess basic goodness, then why are they doing bad things? You started to answer that over here a little bit. Yeah, go ahead.
Ego comes to mind. The need to feel important and feel control over their lives. And may I just quickly say, I think babies are born trusting. I mean, what else are they going to do? But there's a trust that life's going to be okay. And right from the beginning, there could be things that start to affect how they perceive the world.
Certainly. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, in the front row.
It's a bit hard for me to put this into words, but I think it's more that they see something that's easy to do, but not the right thing to do, and they just think, oh, well, I'll get more from doing the easy thing, and people are just going to follow me because they think, oh, I'm doing the right thing because I'm up here at the top.
Good. All right, one more quick question. Oh, we got one more? Go ahead. Yeah, please.
I think it's fear of the unknown or fear, what was the word I was thinking? Feeling challenged and afraid to try to understand others.
Thank you. Last simple question here, but maybe the harder one. What should we do when facing others whose behavior doesn't align with their own basic goodness? What should we do when facing others whose behavior doesn't align with their own basic goodness? Yeah, go ahead.
Find where we meet in the middle. There are definitely values that we all share.
So looking for common ground. Sure. Anyone else? Yeah, over here.
It depends on the severity of it, but in general, like she was saying, yeah, try and find common ground, try and get the person to think more empathetically, see if they're willing to see what they did in some way as being wrong, and just try and make them aware of it and hope that they choose a way that's beneficial towards others or their environment.
Thank you. Yeah, up here in front.
I think maybe rather than approaching it right off the start with trying to figure out why they're wrong, try to figure out where they're coming from. Like, what's the foundation of why they think the way they do?
Sort of understanding the context.
Well, maybe, yeah.
That they're coming from, sure. Yeah, you got one more and then over here last.
Well, actually, this is a great transition to what I'm going to talk about next week, because I think, yeah.
The shameless plug.
Yeah. Because the issue is people are responsible for their behavior. But, as I'll discuss, they should not be blamed for it. We should understand why they did that, and they should be held responsible, but I would not call what you call blame for something.
Great. And back here, yep, one more.
And I can't help but think ultimately we have to do self-care. And so there's a point at which we just have to maybe even distance ourselves a little, not cut off, but even emotionally, psychologically, be able to just let go of and try not to make effort at changing them, but be thinking in terms of preserving our own sense of well-being and our own goodness in letting that go. Otherwise, people can become, those of us who think good can start to feel kind of sad when they lose the fullness of what could be a good relationship.
Thank you. Yeah, self-care is important. It's those 3 deep breaths, right? How do we take care of us? Okay, I'll close up with those. Thank you, Susan, for running the mic. Appreciate it. So these are not easy questions, but we tend to have a pretty clear idea about this, I think. Not easy questions, no simple answers. And I do think, to echo some of what was said, that believing in basic goodness, embodying basic goodness, demands that we slow down long enough to sort of regulate our nervous systems, to consider the context of others, to consider the context around harmful behavior. And when it comes to ourselves and those we love and those whose flaws don't do a lot of harm, it's actually not terribly difficult to extend the idea of basic goodness. But when it's someone whose behavior is horrendously abusive or violent, something in our mind shifts from extending an awareness of basic goodness to protecting ourselves and those we love, sort of this biological idea. I think original sin actually allows for reactive, expedient responses. So-and-so did a bad thing, there's the punishment, next. But this often lacks nuance. It doesn't take into account the context often of the person who did the wrong. Do they suffer poverty? Were they abused? Are they addicted? Are they mentally ill? Why did the harmful one do the harmful thing? Now, I want to say here that the impulse to protect those that we love from harm is completely in line with what Buddhists call right action. At least I believe it is. If someone were trying to harm my children or my family or you guys, you can bet your butts they'd meet the protector side of me. But what if we were to engage the protector side of ourselves while also recognizing the basic goodness, worth, and dignity of those who were committing harm? How would our protective behavior have to change? Again, there's no easy answers, certainly not one that will fit into a sermon. But what we're doing here is this wrestling. And I don't have all the answers, but I do have some guesses about how things could be if we as a species were able to see ourselves through this lens of basic goodness. What if when we saw harm or did harm, we saw ourselves and each other as confused, asleep, making mistakes, missing the mark, rather than being inherently bad? Asleep to awake, rather than bad to good. It's a very Buddhist idea. What if we recognize that some folks are terribly confused, deeply asleep, making hugely damaging mistakes? Maybe basic goodness would invite us to center understanding over punishment, responsibility and reconciliation over condemnation and revenge. What if we applied this kind of thinking to criminal justice? How would it change how we see that? How would it change how we see folks like Trump and MAGA? Would prisons maybe cease to be these horrible abuse cages, instead becoming more like locked rehabilitation centers maybe? Now we might say, that would never work. But Scandinavian prisons already follow this model. As part of a team working on a documentary about 10 years ago, I went inside a maximum security prison in Sweden. And I can promise you, it's still jail. Ain't no country club. Everybody isn't sipping pina coladas in there. But there is a sense that the prison system isn't there to abuse the inmates, but rather to try to reconnect these deeply struggling, harm-causing people, to reconnect them to themselves, to their families, and the society in which they live. What if there was a truly robust system of holding leaders to account, such that a leader who went wheels off and was doing great harm could be removed from power without violence? What if we centered the idea that no one person or group's needs existed above the collective thriving of everyone else? What if we truly understood others through this basic goodness lens? Would we see war come to an end? Would we see an end to poverty, racism, oppression? If we were to truly understand everyone is basically good rather than basically bad, I imagine we'd extend to one another compassion and grace while also holding one another to account. Making mistakes that harm one another, that might never come to a perfect end. But how we react to our confusion, mistakes, flaws, asleepness, this can certainly change. We'll probably always still live in an imperfect world, but it could be a world transformed. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, Pema Chodron's teacher, he called this enlightened society. Maybe so. Amen? Ome takoyasin.